Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to a virtual version of Concordia University's Forest Space here on this rainy day in Montreal. Thanks so much for joining us for today's event. Magnificently shifted to Zoom for today. Complexity, care, and collaboration. Art, science, dialogues on systems. Now, this is part of planetary public and personal health, well-being, and justice, the Sustainability Across Disciplines conference happening this week. We would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. And here at Force-Based, we work with our university community, help mobilize knowledge, co-creating daily activities that examine research questions happening all across the university. Now, we're running today's event, as you know, as a live stream both to YouTube and to Zoom. So comments and questions, I think you know how it works. Just put those into the chat and we'll work that way during the Q&A session. There is no one here in the space, so there won't be any questions coming in from here except from me. And now, it's very much my pleasure to pass the microphone over to Professor of Biology, Principal of the Loyola Center for Diversity and Sustainability, and the co-director of the Loyola Sustainability Research Center, Dr. James Grant. Over to you.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks as usual for the great introduction. And thank you to Fourth Space in general for partnering with us again for our 9th annual Sustainability Across Disciplines Conference. This is welcome to day 3 of our 5-day conference. We have 4 exciting events on schedule today, and if you'd like to see the rest of the schedule for today or the rest of the week, I'm sure Rebecca will pop something into the chat, the link to the full conference schedule. Thanks also for that territorial acknowledgement. Most of us attending here online will be from Tiohtià:ke today, Montreal, but if you're signing in from farther afield, this might be a great opportunity to learn more about the land in which you're situated. And Rebecca may also pop something into the chat that helps with that. So in addition to Fourth Space, we have a number of great collaborators this year. The School of Health, number one, and hence the theme of our conference this year, but also Future Earth and the Department of Geography, Planning, and Environment. And we, of course, are Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability and the Loyola Sustainability Research Institute. Okay, so let's start day 3, exciting day 3. We kick off with this roundtable event entitled Complexity, Care, and Collaboration, Art Science Dialogues on Systems. And it features the ILM Collective, a transdisciplinary platform of professional artists, scholars, and musicians working collaboratively with scientists to generate dialogue and artworks on complex systems. I'm going to say, I'll introduce the 7 panelists very briefly because I want to save as much time as possible for this really cool event. So let me start with Asma Khan, the founder of the collective, is an interdisciplinary artist and researcher based in Montreal. Welcome, Asma.
Welcome, thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Next is Annabelle Bro, a professor in music therapy at Concordia University and a certified music therapist. Welcome, Annabelle. Rachel Berman is a cellist and composer and founder of the new opera company called the Free Opera Ensemble. Welcome to you, Rachel. Next is Nick Carpenter. He is a theater artist, musician, composer, playwright, dramaturg, and instructor at the National Theatre School of Canada. Welcome to you, Nick. Sarah Galarno is a multidisciplinary artist with extensive experience in the field of print media. Welcome to you, Sarah. Then there's Heather McLaughlin, who we know well at our conference, is an assistant professor in the Department of Creative Art Therapies at Concordia University. Welcome again, Heather. And our 7th panelist is Emily O'Brien, an interdisciplinary artist and scholar whose work spans embroidery, drawing, photography, video, and writing. Welcome to you, Emily. Thanks so much for being here this morning. The weather's okay so far, but it's nice that you were all able to come to be so flexible as to show up online today. So let me turn things over to the panel, and I guess I'll turn it over to Annabelle. Take it away, Annabelle.
Thank you so much for the introduction and welcome. And thank you everybody for being here for this roundtable. I feel really privileged to be here with the collective, the ILM Collective. I'm not a member of the collective itself. I'm really here to moderate, but I'm really interested in the work that they've been doing. And when talking with Heather about what we could do for this sustainability conference, she started to talk to me about the collective, and I just thought that the methodology that they employ is really fascinating and worth sharing. And so that will be the main focus of the panel today, is to explore a really innovative arts-based interview approach that was developed by Asma Khan, the founder of the ILM Collective, which features a series of interviews with interdisciplinary scientists whose work intersects with sustainability. And this is done in a way that you'll see is really generative and can create, I think, a very relevant way to relate across discipline and across difference. And I think that in this world, we're really trying to find solutions to really complex problems that span a lot of different kinds of fields. Finding ways to collaborate with each other is super important. And so to give you a sense of how this is going to unfold, in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Heather, who's going to be co-moderating with me, co-hosting with me as a member of the collective. And we'll just give a chance for each member of the panel to tell you a little bit about themselves, a little bit about their artistic practice and what brought them to the project. We'll then move through a series of questions that I've prepared that will help us understand a little bit more the core purpose of the collective, learn more about this methodology that I'm hinting to that involve the collaboration with the scientists, and think more broadly about issues of care and sustainability together. We'll end the roundtable with a moment for questions from the audience and wrap it up. So I'll turn it over to Heather now.
Thank you, Annabelle. Thanks to ForSpace, and thanks as well to the College for Diversity and Sustainability team and the School of Health, who I know have been working so hard and really generously offering this free conference to the community for many years now. And so I'm joining in a couple of roles here, and that's a bit of a mirror of our systemic approach and some of our systemic themes today, where I'm bridging some of our different systems and systemic ways of working. So I'm here, as ForSpace introduced me, as an assistant professor at Concordia. I'm also an art therapist, couple and family therapist, and director of the Concordia Arts and Health Center. And the connection point of the Arts and Health Center is particularly important because that also is part of the connection with ILM Collective, who we'll be introducing you to here shortly. Our center, the Arts and Health Center, as our broader mandate, we provide free creative arts therapies to the broader community. And if you'd like to learn more about that, it's information is available on the Concordia website or on our social media. And as well as providing free therapy, we also think about health in arts and health in the broader sphere, including thinking about ecological and planetary health and just considering how we might be able to contribute to these conversations. As part of that, we have our Sea Change series, which is a creative arts based climate action event series. And that is our connection point with ILM, where Asma, who I have known and collaborated with in different ways over many years, and I have been developing different kind of creative events and workshops in the spirit of Sea Change with the Arts and Health. And Asma has facilitated a number now of arts-based workshops to just help people think about some of the themes about how we can relate and connect differently in these complicated times. And I've actually, as I mentioned, known Asma for, I was trying to remember if it's 15 or 20 years through Montreal's creative community. And what has been so interesting to observe in her work, not only as an artist, the ways that she's connecting and innovating, but just generally, it's been such a marvel to watch her community innovation and particularly community care innovation over the years. And so one example that I'd encourage folks to read about, if you go into Concordia alumni news and look up Asma's name, you'll see that during the COVID-19 pandemic, Asma started this incredible grassroots initiative to feed healthcare workers for free after their long days working in hospitals. And somehow, I don't even know how, managed to mobilize her entire creative community and grocery stores and folks with all kinds of skills to be able to provide free healthy food for healthcare workers for an incredibly extended period of time. And since then, she's just been involved in many other initiatives. And one of them is this collective that you're going to meet today, the ILM Collective. And the ILM Collective has many projects that they are working on creatively, but one that we're going to be foregrounding today is a project of working with science and complexity, particularly focused on science work happening within the climate sphere. What we're going to be sharing today is a work in progress, which systemic work is always a work in progress, generative, iterative work towards an interview series that you'll be able to see once we finalize the filming and the editing process. At the end, we'll let you know where you can find the link and follow to see the updates as these interviews are ready to share. But it's based on an innovative interviewing process, which Asma will talk to you a little bit about. It's an arts-based and collective collaborative approach that really helps to make science ideas and the works of it much more accessible, and to be able to bring in creativity and just different ways of talking across disciplines. And each of the members of the collective, as you'll start to hear, bring in not only their unique arts and approach to the creative arts, but also different perspectives and different ways of bringing curiosity to the conversation. And so I think you'll get a real flavor, even in the conversation the collective brings, to just how we might be able to engage across disciplines differently. And so I'm also part of the collective as far as helping to hold and facilitate those interviews. And so a little later, we'll start to show some of the videos that are part of this. And so you'll see me on the screen there too. I'll now pass the floor over to Asma to introduce herself and talk a little bit more about her vision and what we'll be looking at today. Over to you, Asma.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the intro, Heather, and it's really wonderful to be here. It's such good company. Well, sorry, what was the question?
So if you want to just talk a little bit about the collective, maybe your idea and bringing it together, or however you'd like us to be introduced to the collective and its spirit.
Well, I feel like a little bit of background perhaps would be helpful. So I'm an artist from Pakistan and I studied sculpture. We lived in a time in Pakistan in the 80s and the 90s. It was very political. There was a lot going on, and they were also, as someone learning art, in my culture, I also learned that you had to third space your ideas with something else because of censorship. You couldn't speak directly about the things that you wanted to talk about. So we always learned to talk about something else in reference to what we couldn't talk about. And I think that sort of started this idea of referencing something in order to bring forth something else. And I think that after I moved to Canada 25 years ago, and I was in Europe before that. And so living through different systems also, like I think that as an immigrant, that technique of referencing third spaces in communication became a practice. And I think that's how, well, and then moving into Montreal, I feel so lucky that having lived in the Myland, in this neighborhood that I live in, I got to meet amazing artists in the last 25 years, and I feel very lucky about that. So some of these artists are now part of ILM Collective. So it's been such a wonderful journey of friendship, of knowing each other for 25 years. Most of ILM Collective I've known, and we have such respect for each other's art. And now we're working together again, coming together in a very complex time. And I feel that Canada is a little bit like Pakistan in the sense that there's always something that one is not able to talk about. I know as an immigrant, there's certain things that I can't talk about, and I need to third space, and I need a third discipline to reference and to both talk about, in order to talk about complexity and complex systems, whether it's the system that you're living in or the system that you're studying. It's become a good practice to research a third space or a third discipline. And I think that's how we came together with ILM Collective.
And I wonder, Asma, because such a special part of this too is your art and the space that you are in, the space that welcomes us and welcomes the collective, and we have the privilege of seeing it today. And so I'll cue folks to just actually take a moment. If you look behind Asma and Sarah, you'll get to see some of Asma's magnificent work. Asma is also a Concordia graduate, and we're proud of our graduate from the Faculty of Fine Arts, and so you get to see some of her fine artwork there, and you'll get a feeling of this space where incredible making gets to come together. So as we go through, Asma, we'll hear a little bit more about the interview series specifically, but maybe we can go on to Sarah if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I'm Sarah. I graduated from Concordia in 2015 from the print media program in fine arts. And before that, I was actually studying art history and studio, but I decided to specialize in printmaking, which is what I still do. I teach printmaking at the Visual Arts Center in Westmount, and I just started also teaching at Atelier Circulaire here in the Myland, where I've been a member for the past few years. I also have a master's in fine art from the University of Waterloo, which I did from 2020 to 2022, so right through the pandemic, which was an interesting time. And yeah, in my own work, I try to focus on print, and I've been trying to focus on seeing how print can translate into bigger works like installation. And most recently, I did a large mural in 2024 on a library in Laval, actually, where I used to live, where I used a technique of very, very large stencils, which kind of brought printmaking into a large public sphere, basically. So I've been a member of ILM Collective since the beginning. I'm Asma's roommate, as maybe you can tell, and it was a very it was a no-brainer to join when Asma was kind of starting this off. It was very iterative, and we had already been doing drawing sessions together. Asma had been doing these drawing sessions with people, which was a really lovely experience. And so it was really a no-brainer to start exploring these artistic sessions with scientists.
what a neat opportunity that must have been to find all of these ideas and possibilities just coming to life in your home, Sarah. And I'll also cue people on the Diversity and Sustainability College's description of this event. You'll find links to all of the presenters if you want to read a little bit more of their work. And I'm pretty sure the link to Sarah's has that mural. And Sarah also mentioned that she teaches at the Visual Arts Center in Westmount, which is just, I think it's the oldest nonprofit art school in the country, if memory serves me well. And Sarah is a very well-respected teacher and just such a patient, kind teacher in printmaking there. So I'll do a little call out to that work as well. And now I'll introduce you to Rachel Berman. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, I thought I'd unmuted. I'm good? Okay.
You're good.
All right. Hi, my name is Rachel. I am part of ILM as I'm one of the two musicians in ILM. I'm a cello player and a composer. I most often compose for voice, well, lots of instruments and voice. I've composed and produced 2 operas with my company Opéra Faux. I come to this kind of work from a position that let's say on a good day I call myself an outsider, and on a bad day I call myself an imposter. But all that to say that my university education was not in music, and I'm kind of, but I do have private education in private training in cello, piano, and voice, and I've kind of tried to mobilize every possible capacity and talent I have to explore a range of subjects. My first opera was called Notre Dame, and it was I employed gestural choreographies to tell the story, a kind of imagined story of Anglo-Catholic nuns from the Victorian period who go off and found a little society in a far-off land with the pretext of being missionaries, but who actually are sort of escaping the patriarchy from which they come. So that was my first project with 3 singers, and both of my operas were presented at Théâtre La Chapelle. And my second one was called Slideshow, and it was kind of a mixture of biography and fiction. The biography of the main singer, so basically we explored her family's photographs through a series of interviews. I developed a fictional story based on her family's history, basically, with the approbation of her family. And so that kind of necessarily also explored social history, because it was sort of the influence of Quebec's Quiet Revolution on her family, and then the knock-on effects that this had on their children. And but I kind of used that as a springboard to invent a fictional story. And recently I'm working and trying to finish a project, an audio project, which I call an audio novella, which is takes place in Montreal's metro system. I recorded about 30 pieces from played by 7 different metro musicians who I found really talented and whose music I found really interesting. And I worked with them to create, to arrange their pieces, sometimes in more elaborate ways, and to create kind of portrait of Montreal, of the music happening in Montreal's metro. But I also have added to this a sort of, there's a narration being built based on my own experience when I was a young person playing in Montreal's metro, playing the cello and singing in the metro. So there's a whole narration and thing happening there. So that's to come. And another new project is using as a starting point Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. And basically I'm interested in how this work can resonate today, how the post-war context in which it was created might give us ways of thinking about the time we're living through now. So I also do some teaching work. I work with a lot with the musician composer André Papatoma, and we teach together in the Art Adapté program at Place des Arts, working with lots of different groups of people. And yeah, so I would say my practice is interdisciplinary, but centered around music. And it was when I took many photographs of the metro for my metro project and published some of them on Facebook that Asma said, "Hey, you have a good eye, you should come to our drawing group." And so I naively went to this drawing group and learned that it was a whole world wonderful adventure in itself. So I'm really happy to be part of it, and yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Rachel. And so, I mean, you're already cueing to part of Asma's artistry is her artistry and finding people and
Yeah.
bringing them together and being curious, right, of the different things that we can bring together. And I love that you said, well, I don't love the word imposter, but I love that you said it because I think it's one of these words that we should just put out there because all of us feel it at different times and in different ways. And you gave just this, it's a beautiful and a little bit funny example of when somebody says that word and then you hear all they're actually up to and all that they're doing. And it's just like, oh my goodness, wow. That's amazing. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go over to Nick next.
Hi there. I have maybe a little, the way my imposter complex shows up is in the two fields, the two disciplines that I work within, which are music and theater. And on a with the musicians I work with, I tell them that I'm a playwright, and with the playwrights I work with, I tell them that I'm a musician, so that both groups are always impressed by what I can bring, because the playwrights think I'm such a good musician, and the musicians think wow, I'm such a good playwright. But I don't tell the playwrights that I'm a playwright, and I don't tell the musicians that I'm a musician. So I work as in the theater mostly. I work in the theater as a musician. I do sometimes write plays. I've written a couple of short librettos, and I also am a dramaturg. I'm a teacher as well, and so I wear several different hats within the theater world, and that brings me into contact with the music world at times. I suppose one of my interests is where art, in terms of thinking about cross-disciplinary or cross-fertilizing fascinations, I'm very interested, it seems that I'm interested in where art and war intersect. I'll leave it at that for now, but that's when I write, my imagination goes to that
Okay.
that place.
More.
And so this, the reason that I'm part of this is, well, I've known Asma as well for decades, for a good 20, 25 years. And we've collaborated before, and we've been great friends throughout. This summer, Asma and I went for a walk, or maybe she texted me or something and said, Nick, you should listen to this interview on the Life Scientific, which is Jim Al-Khalili interviews scientists on this BBC radio program. And without saying anything more, Asma just said, just listen to this interview. And it was an interview with someone named Doan Farmer. And I listened with interest, and this guy sounded fascinating and had lots of great stories. Maybe we'll talk about Doan coming up. But when, a few days after having listened to the interview, Asma and I went for a walk. She said, so what do you think of the interview? And I said, it was very interesting. She said, I'm in touch with that guy. And that opened up, that proceeded to a conversation about how we as artists might have conversations with scientists. And the ILM Collective has been the avenue to that, which I'm very happy to be part of. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Nick. And so as everybody's talking, part of what you're getting is like all of these different paths that have brought us to converging, and with Asma as our connector. And you highlighted something I think is also important in interdisciplinarity, Nick, that when we not just cross disciplines across people, but when those interdisciplines live in ourselves, that sometimes that can bring up this sort of confusing relationship of like, which one, and am I better at this one, and how will I be perceived? But also it can be hard to show like what happens when those get to come together and how it becomes something new. And that there's this layer of sometimes a generalist's ability to be able to go through those, or that bridging that comes in. And so much of that, I think we'll hear in the different ways of all of the folks who are part of the collective, who are all working across disciplines. And you're showing something that I think you'll see carries through, which is, so you're on this walk with Asma where she's introducing you to the work of that scientist. It makes me think of a moment where I was coming over for tea, and I thought we were going to be talking about art, and I got tricked into talking about quantum physics, which wouldn't have been good marketing to come over for me in the first place. Maybe others, and no offense, but it's not something that I can understand. And then was so struck that when it's made in a way that's accessible and you can understand and have beautiful metaphors, bring it to life, and then see the beauty of it, we connect differently. And so you were sharing some of that there too. So thank you. We'll go now over to Emily.
Hi, everybody. I just want to make sure, first of all, that my volume is okay. I'm trying to kind of speak at a louder voice, and it's okay? Okay, great. So I'm Emily, and I'm an artist and researcher, writer, so also interdisciplinary. I work with textiles mostly, but my career or life in the arts has been always straddled science and art, as well as being a fine artist and having gone to school for that. I've also, I'm also an art restorer. And so that was actually how I first started in the arts. And so although I struggled with like understanding the intricacies of the chemistry, it was something that I had to master to a certain degree. And throughout that, I've also always been interested in community health, and community health through the arts. And so I have co-founded a climate advocacy group that's currently operating right now, which is called For Our Kids Montreal. And through that group, did a lot of art workshops with community, as well as through another group called Republic. And then just recently I've been, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. Just recently, I've also been doing workshops at conferences on community health and creativity. And I also ran for a while, I ran and co-curated a community, local community hub called Monastiraki. So all of that to say that I've known, sorry, I've known my great friend Asma for many years, and we've had wonderful conversations over those years that late into the night about all of these things that we love to talk about, from the micro to the macro, and how the world connects. So ILM Collective came into my life as this wonderful opportunity to work together with these other artists, drawing together and continuing these conversations and meeting these wonderful scientists that Asma researches and then that we get to kind of do deep dives into. And so it was a great way to bring together my advocacy for climate and my love of the natural world and my love of health and how we connect and interconnect into the world.
Thank you, Emily. And Emily, you've also been an important part of Sea Change and provided some incredible arts-based workshops as part of that. You'd mentioned for our kids, Montreal is one of these groups. So I put that in the chat, and maybe after, I know you had another one that you mentioned, maybe after we're done, you can add that as well if folks are interested. And so again, with what you're sharing, we can see all of the other layers that are coming in your work, and all the way each of you is connecting in community. And so we can imagine the sort of exponential impacts you start to have, and the ways that can sort of ripple beyond all of that. And I think you were showing that very nicely. So thank you, Emily. And I want to make sure I don't think I've missed anybody. So maybe just before we go on to the questions, Annabelle, Asma, do you mind coming back, and we'll sort of bookend you for another moment. Okay, there you are. I wonder now, would it be okay, Asma, to just talk a little bit more specifically about the interview, the interview series project that ILM has been working on?
Absolutely. I think that one thing that we are doing in ILM Collective, I'll talk about 2-3 things, and then we'll try to imagine them at the same time later on. But as an artist who is constantly working with science and working with a part of science that you won't understand. There's always, because I'm not a scientist, as an artist who's approaching science, there's always something fundamental that you don't understand. But as the drawing hand draws, because we are artists, and at this point in our lives, we're all mid-career artists at ILM Collective, and the hand knows its mark making. And I think that the hand can also pick up what it doesn't understand, and it picks up what it understands, and it picks up new ideas in emergent mark making. So I think the idea of ILM Collective is to be in conversation with scientists. And while we ask them questions, in that moment, we are also drawing, and the hand is constantly mark making in order to pick the things that we missed, and even to create marks of what we don't understand. And I think that becomes an interesting engagement where there's a constant communication happening on our side as we interview scientists, that we're listening, and everybody at ILM Collective is now used to drawing as they interview and as we speak. So in the way we do this is that we meet once a week and we have our drawing modules where generally we do a 1 month immersion into the system that we want to study. So each scientist, like for example, our second scientist was an astrophysicist who was working with both the origin of life and also the possibility of life on Mars. And so, you know, as artists, we spent about a month studying that, and also for a month trying to find marks that and creating artwork that to us connects to the origin of life. So when we interview the scientists, we're already sort of practiced, at least the hand is practiced in drawing a certain kind of system that the scientist belongs to. So so I think that our drawing hand is kind of creating this seamless experience of interviewing and interviewing a scientist and knowing a system, getting to understand a system that we don't know, that we're just on the edge of. So I think it's a little bit of edge walking with one discipline to another, and that's what we're hoping to do.
And so maybe just I'll back out a step to give folks in the audience a bit of a map of what this looks like. So the collective has been meeting and innovating these arts-based processes, and Asma has developed very specific ways to engage with art making that help to connect and understand and explore, and also sort of develop different kinds of thinking and curiosity. And so that's been ongoing. And then this project within it, among other projects, is this interview series with the scientists. And Nick brought that to life in that moment when he was talking about the walk and hearing about this one scientist that Asma was very excited about. And you can't have a conversation with Asma without there being the different scientific rock stars of the moment. But what keeps being the surprise, I think, to all of us is we might have our rock stars, but none of us would suddenly decide to send them an email and ask if we could interview them. And if any of you have secretly done that, I'm guessing the stats of those replying with a yes is maybe not that high. And I believe Asma now has 100% yeses with the folks that she's reached out to, who are folks with very impressive careers and who've been really quite excited to be interviewed in this very different way. And so now there have been 3, and we can talk a little bit about that. And we're going to start with the questions here that Annabelle is going to bring in, that's going to help to bring this a little more to life. So there's the 3, and I'll put it back to you in a moment, Asma, if you just want to talk just maybe even briefly to name who those 3 are. We'll start the video and then we can go into the questions, which will bring it more to life. So who are these 3 who you've reached out to so far? And there's more to come.
Well, one of them reached out to us after we'd done the first interview. I also wanted to just quickly say that I grew up with scientists in the family, so on both sides of my family. So one thing as a kid, and we had very engaging scientists in our family who were actively teaching us on family gatherings. We were learning about particle physics or different things. But one thing that I think connects artists to scientists is this obsessive fever that we can have. I think these 2 professions really match each other in terms of mad, crazy obsessions and you know, like going indoors to either your lab or your studio and not coming out for 3 days, looking like the way you look after 3 days because you've been that obsessed. So I think that's something that scientists and artists share, really that level of obsession and madness. So it's really delicious when it's matched as an artist with a scientist. So far we started with a wonderful scientist, Don Farmer. And of course, we were so mad and obsessed about his obsessions. I think he's the father of chaos theory and the father of so many new disciplines. And so I think just to interview him, ILM Collective prepared perhaps 2 to 3 months just to create an interview with him. And then after that, we were approached by a wonderful, brilliant complexity scholar, environmental scientist, Roger Cromatis, who's Spanish from and works with the University of Leeds in England. And so we worked with him and we collaborated with him. We don't just interview the artists, we're scientists, we're also collaborating with them. So he gave us a whole bunch of scientific data that we turned into artwork. And then after that, after Roger, we interviewed Dr. Eric Boyd, who was working with the origin of species and also works with NASA in exploring life on other planets and works with extremophiles. So yeah, so we've explored 3 different systems so far.
Thank you. I wonder, Annabelle, we'll go over to you and we can start with the questions. And for space, do you mind starting our video now so folks can start to get a feeling? You'll see little clips from the video and you'll see some of this process coming to life.
Great. Excellent. So the video will probably help a little bit here, but I would like to know if you could tell us a little bit more about this interview methodology that was developed and how the dialogue between the artists and scientists actually unfold in practice. So you've hinted to the preparation, right? Looking at data, I'm imagining some reading, watching YouTube video, making some art to prepare for the encounter. But once you are meeting with the scientists, how does that unfold? What happens?
Well, I think that firstly, we are also, before we meet the scientists, we are trying to map the system that they work with. So we're learning different kinds of mark makings through collaboration. And most of the scientists that we're working, 2 of the scientists that we worked with, they sent a whole bunch of data to us that we studied, and then we started to draw around the data that they sent us. So our mark making is kind of specific for each scientist because of the homework that we do. And in the moment, I think what happens and what's interesting is when we start to interview, there's a lot of nervousness on our side because we are preparing to meet an entire discipline, the expert of a discipline that we really just skimmed the surface of for 1 month. So, and I think that excitement and that nervousness of meeting a new discipline that is carried really well with our drawing hand. So when we start our interview, everybody has a pencil in their hand and a sketchbook and their chosen art materials, and we start drawing. And then, so I think what we are sort of drawing our questions that we have for the scientists, plus the answers and the spaces in between. So we are marking the whole interview, and it's a long format interview, and we mark that through drawing. That's Roger that you can see on screen right now, and that's our guest artist. We also have guest artists now with each, so we have a wonderful guest artist in that video, Nadine Farage, who is drawing in the moment as well. So I think the idea of emergent artwork, because nervousness is really good to pick up new marks. Like when you're nervous and you're working with this large body of a discipline that you don't know much about. And so I think the hand becomes activated through that nervousness, and it gets us to start to draw what we don't know, and or what we are learning at the same time. So I think that's the basic process.
And I'm just wondering about the questions. So who crafts the questions? Who asks the questions? You also hinted at the data that the scientists would provide you, and like that's just my outsider lens here, but I'm wondering like what kind of data did they provide you with? Like are we talking like Excel spreadsheets? Are we talking like articles that are already formed? Was it more work in progress?
Yes, that's a really good question. So, in terms of data, each scientist would provide a different sort of data. The second scientist we worked with, Roger, he gave us a lot of climate change data, and there were also some graphs in there, and so yeah, there were graphs and there were some visuals, and there was data. And I must say, like the data that we were working with was really depressing data, like things like when is Venice sinking, and in terms of climate change. And that's the interesting thing about the interview series as well, that when we actually got to talk to him and got to interview him in the long format way that we spend a lot of time creating the interview. I conduct the main part of the interview, and everybody at ILM has all the members of ILM get 2 questions to ask as well for what. And so, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Sarah, you had something to say, right?
Sure, I was going to just talk about how part of the preparation is also preparing questions for the interview, right? So
Right.
as we'll get together once a week, basically, and we'll draw together, but we're listening to maybe a talk that the scientist has done, and in preparation for the interview, we're preparing questions for said scientist. And that's, I think, part of the process. I think in preparing these questions it's not really something that I just think of the blue. I think right out of the blue. It takes a little bit of time to think about these questions that we want to ask these scientists. And I think and when we conduct the interviews, we go around in a circle, and the responses that we get from these scientists in response to our questions. And honestly, I think everyone has had such incredible questions and really wonderfully thought out questions for these scientists. And then we're also drawing as we in response to their questions as these scientists are talking. I don't know.
So I imagine that some questions emerge as you're also engaging in the process.
And one thing that we offer our scientists, so as you can see Sarah's hand that's drawing right now, what we offer our scientists during the interview as appreciation of their time is that we draw a systems portrait of them, what we call a systems portrait, because we've already been studying their system for a month, and now we're looking at them. And so right now, like as you can see on the screen, everybody at ILM Collective is drawing the scientist in front of them, and they're doing a blind contour of the scientist. Blind contour is a way of drawing where you're not looking down at what you're drawing, you're just looking at your subject and drawing seamlessly. So, and then we develop our drawing of the scientist in the next few weeks, and give it to them as a gift, which they always appreciate.
It's a really lovely touch. Yes, Heather?
Well, and I'll just add, Asma, if you want to talk about this too a little bit, because so you go into quite a process of developing like the questions you come up with. There's real deep thought and research that goes into those that really help the scientists bring their work to life in a way that it is also accessible. And so that brings in all of these layers for that person to be able to share their work. And then it's been so interesting to see how the scientists themselves, that each of those will bring them to how they tell their story. And I think you're good at bringing that story to life. And then each of the members of the collective with different experiences, different perspectives, or just even the different ways that curiosity gets ignited. It's been striking how the scientists will get particularly excited by certain questions that just come at it from this angle.
It's true, and I think also what's really wonderful that we discovered during and we were talking about it last week, all of us, that um, there's a certain vulnerability also in first of us that we don't know that subject so well, and but we are, and we're doing our best to create a very robust interview, and we try to ask technical questions as well from our scientists. So we do study quite a bit, but they show up, our scientists show up with certain vulnerabilities, and they share certain vulnerabilities and private stories during our interviews, which become really like as Emily has brought up the idea, warm data. Like I think that as we're dealing with data with the scientists, like there's also warm data that we're feeling in the moment from the scientists, where there's vulnerability and there's care and there's kindness and also curiosity on their part, because I think it's also an interesting experience for them, because there's 5, 6 artists that are sitting in a room drawing them while interviewing them at the same time. So I feel like that becomes an interesting experience for them as well.
And also, sorry, Emily, I see you. See your hand. I'll just say, and also this permission to follow impulses. So while we're following impulses as drawers and artists in the moment, that may also eventually allow, after 10, 15, 20 minutes of the interview, the scientists to also follow their own impulses, conversational impulses.
Emily, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that just to expand on that, the vulnerability, and like one thing that I've really noticed that happens and that I've reflected on is that all of us, including the scientists, when we come into this engagement, we don't know what it is actually. And in that not knowing is this incredible space where we can kind of just be all beginners to a certain point. Even the expert who is sharing their information with us and answering our questions, he doesn't know, or they don't know exactly why we're doing this, but it's this bridge that we're creating together. And when we're doing the drawing or the musical responses, when we're responding in the way that we do, that kind of in itself is this landscape that's just coming out as we're doing it. And there's no, like, you're not premeditating what it's going to look like. And so that's kind of a mirror of the conversation, but it becomes this beautiful, like, embodied and kind of alive experience. So I just wanted to kind of expand on that idea of what vulnerability is in this moment, how I see it.
Absolutely. And I'm also struck at the idea of just the art studio in and of itself as like such a space of creativity, and bringing that as an interview sort of space is also, I think, sets for very particular conditions that are allowing for these really particular encounters to occur. And I guess the next question I have here, and some of you are already hinting, but I really would like to make sure we get everybody's voice in the collective around what it's been like for you to be part of the process. Like, what have you been learning about complex systems, and what moments or insights have stood out for you as you've been engaging in the process with these 3 scientists that have been interviewed? Emily, did you want to start? Yeah.
Well, if nobody else jumps in, I can.
Go for it.
I think we talked about a little bit about this just recently. I think for me, what one of my takeaways has been, first, that I don't have to understand everything that I'm learning about, especially right in the moment, and that it can be, I just have to get my face off the screen, because I find that really is throwing me off. There we go. And so there's like this really lovely openness, like I was just speaking about. And it's been allowing me to kind of open up my own ideas about how I respond to these big questions that a lot of us are asking about our world and about interconnection, but also about what our responsibilities are, or how we can react, I suppose. And sometimes I come away thinking, this is enough. Like this, in just being together and having these conversations, it feels enough in the moment. It feels enough to be bridging and asking these questions and just kind of attempting these other ways of understanding. And so, like, as somebody who's been really involved in climate activism and social activism and advocacy, it's been like this really welcome space to be with others and to learn in a way that is not necessarily, I don't know, so evident, I would say, right away. Yeah, it allows there to be kind of more openness, and maybe we were talking about hope, and it kind of is a different perspective on hope.
Can you say a little bit more about that? What do you mean by it's another perspective on hope? What do you feel it affords?
Well, I think, again, because of my history of working in with community and climate work, especially in social justice work, I have felt a big diminishing of hope. And I'm also always looking for it. And as a mother, I'm always looking for reasons to stay hopeful, I guess. And this experience these scientists have such expanded huge idea or ways of seeing things, and how things connect, and how much we don't know, and so in that space of not knowing and of understanding, or at least acknowledging the complexity and the interrelationship of things, there's a beautiful kind of like a moment where you can step back and say, okay, we don't know everything. And there is so much interrelation and interdependence. And so it just, I guess, reorients me into that not knowing. And with that, there's a bit of liberation and almost like awe at the beauty of that.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. That's so important.
I just wanted to add to that as well, that there's a sense of like, when we were working, for example, with climate change data with one of our scientists, where we were looking at images, and there were these big headlines, Venice is sinking, for example. And it was a lot of climate change data for Europe and forecasting what could happen. And so I think a lot of us, when we were going into the conversation with Roger, as a climate scientist, we were pessimistic, and we already had a certain idea of doom and gloom, for example. But we came away with so much excitement, because Roger was just like, you guys have no idea. If we were to eat tofu 3 times a week and not eat meat, for just this simple stats that he had, he's like, the difference is colossal. So like, it's always with these scientists, we always learn the micro effects create macro results. And so how constantly we are tying micro and macro systems in these interviews, it's always been so hopeful for us. Also, Don Farmer, the first scientist that we interviewed, and who's the father of chaos theory, and such an elder. Like, when we did ask him questions about AI and doom and gloom and things about endings and stuff, he was like, yeah, we've gone through it before. We had we had people burning witches, and then we went through this system, and then we went through that system, and surely enough, we'll go through this as well. So there's a sense of great resilience, and that these scientists are bringing for us, which is absolutely incredible, and which we don't expect during the interview.
There's also this a conversion that we talked about the other night. This conversion from fear into curiosity.
Exactly.
And when you're curious, it's very hard to feel dread. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Totally. And I think that's a very important part. I think that would be the uh, main thing behind ILM Collective, which is that there are so many things to be scared of right now. And I think that an art science space, creating that sci-art space, it helps to constantly turn that fear into curiosity.
And it's not just the fear of the future that I'm necessarily talking about, although it is that too. But it's also the fear that was referred to earlier about the sort of intimidation we might feel in the face of this very eminent scientist about whose field we know practically nothing, and yet we are feeling audacious enough to ask them questions. That fear transmuting itself into curiosity is also a wonderful conversion.
So important, right? Because, how often do collaboration not happen because we're scared of looking silly or not knowing or, not being skilled enough or not being smart enough, right? Like, I think people, sometimes we stopped really like potentially transformative work before it even begins. I think that Rachel wanted, Heather, and then I
over to
wanted to
Rachel,
Rachel.
and then I'll
Okay.
do something after. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to mention the concept of emergence, which seems kind of obvious, but I sort of learned from Dawn Farmer. And yeah, it is distracting, the video. Anyway, having your face in front of you. But yeah, the concept of emergence, of things that emerge from complex systems. So meaning things that are not part of the individual parts, that so a new thing that comes out of that. And I think in a way, ILM is like the embodiment of that idea. And what's wonderful about the interviews is that we're leaving visible traces that also approach the issues from totally different angle and from a different part of our brain and ourselves. And they're there afterwards, so they can, looking at them can allow our interpretation to deepen and expand over time. And I just think it's a very beautiful example of emergence. So that's all.
Well, and I think, Rachel, and maybe we'll get to this a little later, but you're making me think a little bit. We see in the video where we sort of flip things, and Rachel and Nick are making music, and maybe a little later they'll talk to us about this incredibly interesting and innovative way that they approach that music making and our responses to it. But also, well, it comes into conversations you and I, Annabelle, have as we think about collaborating across art and music, and when we bring in the time element and the rhythm and all of the other elements of music that help us also perceive and experience differently. And I was just thinking, Rachel, as you were talking there around emergence, I was just hearing some of those little echoes of that musical thinking of and different ways of conceiving time, and time is also a vector that we've looked at. And this curiosity piece, I just think it's such an important one to foreground, because a lot of this, as well as cultivating the creativity, it is cultivating that curiosity. And then in the connection, trying to stay curious. It sounds so easy, but it's very hard. As a person who trains therapists, this is one of the things that we focus on a lot, of how hard it is for us sometimes to stay in curiosity, or to help people stay there without it, the things that trap it up, the knowing or wanting to be certain or wanting to control. And also how quickly judgment comes in and creates shame and closes conversations and distances it from each other. And so there's a real art and craft in cultivating that.
Heather, could I ask you what your experience was like the first time drawing and interviewing at ILM Collective?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So Very curious, would be my answer, because so the collective had I joined later, and I've joined in this sort of funny, interesting, emergent, complicated role of this collective has been working together, I think, for at least a year or more before I joined. And I've joined in sort of this 1 foot in, 1 foot out way. Part of that is just structural because of my schedule, and trying to find ways to join. And because some of this has been connecting as far as events we're doing at the university or through my arts and health role. And then I've been coming sort of slowly from behind, joining the collective, trying to find what my place is. I have a experience. My background was as a visual artist first and an art educator second before becoming a therapist. So some of this just feels like so natural and grounding me into earlier roots. And some of it is so completely, like it's completely new and stretching me in ways. It's new because as an art therapist for so long, it's been just like following people's leads and the ways they make, and to have like directives to follow with a very different rationale than it would be in a studio arts or even in art education. It's just been like, it's a stretch to my brain, and I accidentally sort of will rebel in the way I'm doing it and come back. And that's so neat. And just trying to really, I think that's stretching and trying to be open to some of this learning. I'm like disappointed in myself, and then sort of delighted in that disappointment, where much like I said with the quantum physics of just like, I don't want to hear about it. And then like, oh, then you start bringing in these metaphors and stories and all of the interconnections across levels and time. And then it becomes interesting. So it's just been so fascinating and vulnerable and neat. It's really something else.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Sarah, was there something you wanted to add? Sarah? No, I thought earlier maybe you wanted to add something. I just wanted to make sure you get a chance to share about your experience as well.
Oh, earlier. I think I just wanted to, when everyone was talking about the emergent, learning about emergence, I think that one of the wonderful things about the collective is that it creates a space for emergence and the unexpected, the kind of very experimental quality of what we're doing. It creates this space where other things can emerge completely that we would not have expected as well. And so new things can also emerge, things that we didn't necessarily expect would happen, like last summer, for example. New things are always going to emerge, and maybe, and we don't know what kind of form they'll take either. So I think that's wonderful to have that kind of space that we kind of create the base for something that we don't exactly know. We have things that are planned, but we don't always know what the results will be down the line too. So I think that that creating that kind of emergent space, if what I said makes sense, is also
It's like experimenting without even a hypothesis.
in some of, partly, yes.
But also, I think part of it, another reason why we don't know what things are going to look like is the collaborative part of it as well. Because, for example, a second collaboration, which was with Boyd, Eric Boyd, who's an astrophysicist. Our second collaboration and third interview was with him. And so given the kind of data that they give us, and then so that changes the art form, of course. And now we're approaching data with as collage, for example. Every member of the collective will have completely their own approach to how they would approach that data and what they're going to do with it. So, for example, some of us could do collage, and then it's also really interesting that amongst us, two of us, like Rachel and Nick, are musicians that are drawing and learning to draw, and then drawing during the interview. So their approach is so unique and rich as musicians, and then everybody at ILM Collective has their own approach. So So it's also really fun for us, and I think that's an emergent part as well, how everybody approaches data. It'll be totally different. Rachel could look at data and think of sculpture. Nick could look at data and think of composing a music or think of the structure of a play. So our own systems that we are used to, our systems of creating, work with what they give us, and that creates the emergence of different approaches.
And one thing I'd
Rachel.
mention, if it's, yeah, one thing I'd mention relating to what Asma just said, but also Nick's comment that it's like, sorry, investigating a question without a hypothesis. Anyway, I'd say that as musicians and artists, one thing we have in common is that often we'll start by a gesture, and perhaps scientists start with a question, and I think there's something really interesting there. I think that for us, the questions will often emerge out of the gestures. And I just think it's really interesting to see the interplay of gestures and questions.
Speaking of questions, I think soon I would like to turn it to the people in the audience if they have any questions that they would like to ask the collective. But before we do that, is there anything you would like to add before we move on to that part? Any last part that like, I really want people to know about this part of the process, or what it's done for you, or how the artists have, how the scientists have reacted, how care is showing up? Is there anything left that you'd like to say before we move to questions from the audience?
Just a quick,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Asma.
Just one thing that I'd like to add, the reason why we are interested in studying systems is that as an artist who's lived through I've lived in 3 different cultures, and I've seen 3 different ways that we live with the construct of time and space. In the way we live, the concept of time in Pakistan is very different than the concept of time in Paris, for example, or in Montreal. The culture of time, what we think time is, and how we approach the hour. And I feel like science is such an incredible and profound way to relearn the larger systems that we live with, but we don't fully understand. I've also, in my personal opinion, I've understood time to be a vessel of loss. In mainstream society, the way time is constructed, it's more loss. You're always losing something. But then when you study time, the construction of time in quantum physics, it gives you so much more generosity than our mainstream societies give to the system of time. So I feel like that is a really, it, as artists, science creates almost like a parallel universe to be more of ourselves, which mainstream society may not. So I feel like that is that's why we are interested in learning systems through science.
And what I wanted to say was just that the name, to address the name, ILM, it's not an acronym. It is not ILM. It is ILM. And Asma, what does ILM mean?
Oh, ilm is, yes, in Arabic, it's the ilm means the pursuit of higher knowledge. The pursuit of higher knowledge. So yeah, that's what we're hoping for. Yeah.
Can I just add one more thing? Oh, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
You can go, Emily, and then I'll go after you.
Well, I just wanted to, you had mentioned about care, Annabelle, and I think we were talking about this as well as a group about kind of the culture of care that we feel this is generating for us and as well as for the scientists. And it's kind of, it's caring about each other enough to have these conversations and to be vulnerable together. And so kind of like jumping across, let's say, through silos to the, bridging that, it does kind of create that, it is done with care, and it creates that culture as well.
I think that's a perfect jumping off point for what I was just going to add, was that wonderful breaking of boundaries and silo jumping, basically, is that I think part of it is that also the scientists themselves have had wonderful reactions to the experience, and I think all of them have given feedback after the interviews, right? And they've all given such wonderful feedback, and I think they've all been I don't know if any of them have been surprised by the experience that they've had, but I think they've all been quite fascinated by the experience of um, of talking with artists, and how as much as it is a vulnerable um, um, and curiosity expanding experience for us as artists, I think it is also for the scientists as well. And a few of them have remained in touch, and would probably, I feel like any of them would probably
We'll be
be
collaborating
happy to
with
come
them.
back
Yes.
in like a year. And I think they all had a very good time, actually, with the interviews, and I feel like it was constructive for them too.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'll just chime in because I think we know they've enjoyed it because all have followed up, and many of them have continued. Like, it's the start of a conversation, particularly Asma, you've mentioned some of the conversations that kept growing, just even afterwards, that have been very meaningful. I'm wondering if it could be a good point, only if folks are able to and want to, but if you are here and could turn on your videos, it'd just be nice to even see you, and don't think that means we're going to put you on the spot to ask questions, but if you feel comfortable doing that, it would be just great to have that moment where we can also connect with folks who are here. And I know with these kind of conversations, it can also be, sometimes there's a lot to absorb and a lot of layers to it. So it can feel a little hard to formulate a question, even though there's lots of curiosity. And so just also, like, responses are fine, or other ideas, anything you'd like to share. I think we can open up to that too.
I can answer a question that came up in the link in the chat. I mean, I am not the Nick Carpenter who worked for the Concordia link. I don't know who, I don't know, but that's amazing that there's another Nick Carpenter out there who did, but ce n'est pas moi.
Thank you for clearing that up. I think James has a question.
Well, if no one else does, I'm just so fascinated by this procedure. So these scientists are probably very good communicators to begin with, and hence they're so famous. But I'm wondering if they have become better communicators after interacting with the collective, by forcing them out of their comfort zone, and what they said and what your impressions were about that.
I think we hope so, but we can definitely, we're quite sure that this is probably the first time that they were talking to a group of artists. This is not their usual, they're always in seminars and talking to other scientists, and I think most of the scientists we worked with are very multidisciplinary, but they are never, so they are always taken by, oh, artist, oh, we're being interviewed by an artist. So I think they hold a different space for that, because that's what we've noticed, and that's really great. So we do have a different kind of attention with them, I find.
I wonder too, a common thread we haven't noted is they all are also educators, and each member of the collective in different ways, maybe more formal, conventional, and just in life and ways of being and connecting. That educator discipline comes through, and so that probably plays a piece as well.
One thing I wanted to mention is that we're talking about the possibility, as time goes on, of daring to make our questions a little more related to our own work, so as really to provoke a truly interdisciplinary conversation. And I think there's a bit of shyness at first, talking with these super experts, but I think there's lots of concepts related to our artistic practice that would be really interesting to interrogate scientists about, and how they feel that they appear in their work. So personally, and I think this is shared, I'm looking forward to my own questions tending a little more in that direction. And I think it'll make it a rich experience for the scientists.
I think we have another question from Rebecca.
Thank you to all of you for this amazing work and for sharing it with us. It's really so much about what we try to do at the college and the research center through events like this. Jim and I are both scientists who teach to artists among, and everybody else. So this may be particularly of interest to us, but I'm wondering if you're looking to expand collaborations, particularly here at Concordia. What kind of collaborations would you be interested in expanding on particularly, or are you looking for scientists of any type or ilk, or are there specific directions that you're interested in taking this work in moving forward?
I think we're looking at both macro systems. So really, like anything from astrobiology to quantum physics to geology to anything, because it's interesting thinking about systems, because, like, for example, Sarah, who's incredibly well versed in printmaking and has been teaching printmaking for many, many years. So she understands a certain process of printmaking inside and outside. And so when she asks, with knowing her system really well, when she starts to ask questions of another system, her systems are very particular. And I think that, so that kind of texture is really interesting for us as well, that we are all mid-career artists who are very à l'aise with our own processes of creativity. So when we ask scientists about systems, it really could be any kind of scientist. But what we do is do 1 month immersion to study that scientist. So we would love to collaborate with Concordia, for example, and scientists with Concordia could be AI, could be, as long as we have 1 month to study them.
Well, and I wonder, Asma, I think it will be very interesting. I'm going to connect you with Rebecca afterwards. And Rebecca, I was thinking about a conversation we had during our last conference, where you not only help us fall in love with the campus of Loyola and all of the life there with the urban forests and the pollinator garden and everything else, but you were sharing some of these stories about just the play that comes into this, and playing in the snow and being outside. And I just think that there's so much potential for how we might be able to come together. So I think this could be a really nice bridge. And you're also very well connected to all of the life and the love and interesting stories happening within the research at Concordia.
I had a very amazing experience working with Concordia in a collaboration. I was collaborating on another project a few years ago with microscopy, the microscopy department at Concordia, which was really an incredible experience. And the conversations it generated were so fun. When I was talking to the head of microscopy at Concordia, like, because she is so obsessed with her work. And so we were both discussing, she's like, yeah, basically my process is I try to find as many excuses at home that I can to come to work as much as I can. And I was like, oh yeah, me too. I have to create an excuse to just come to the studio 7 days a week. So we were just sharing that level of obsession that she has as a, in microscopy. So it was a really wonderful experience collaborating with her from Concordia.
I'm just aware of time, and I will do my job as the moderator to take a moment to thank everybody for your generosity, for sharing this vulnerable process with us, for inspiring so much curiosity about the ways we can engage with things that are hard and that create discomfort, but that can be incredibly generative when we approach it from a sense of curiosity. And so thank you for having us, for hosting us for this panel. And hopefully we can keep in touch if you have any questions, and we can see the work continuing. Thank you.
And I'll just take one last note to remind folks that if you're on Instagram, that's probably the best way to get some of this information. I strongly encourage you to follow the ILM Collective's Instagram page, where the collective is always posting the work. And that link you will find in the conference page. It's actually, it's linked there, as well as the link to see Asma's artist page, where you can see and spend more time with the work that you see behind her. Also, the Concordia Arts and Health Center, we have a Instagram page that you can find, as well as LinkedIn and on Facebook. And I'll be posting this information there as well. That one might be easier to search, so I can put those links in there a little later today so people can find them easily. Thanks everybody for joining us, and big thanks to ILM Collective for space and the College for Diversity and Sustainability for welcoming us.
Thank you. Amazing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks everyone for joining us, and also for all of the comments and questions coming in. We are going to be closing up our live stream to YouTube right now, but that remains available on our YouTube channel, and you can revisit it there. And we will be leaving the Zoom open for anyone that's sticking around, because at 1 o'clock, the conference continues with State of Montreal's Urban Birds with Mackenzie Guest and Sienna Blyer. And so you should stick around for that. So we'll see you back here at 1 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.